A bustling morning, the heart of a 21st century metropolis. You stand waiting for your usual coffee, completely oblivious to the shadow of deep time standing right in front of you. The barista at the counter radiates an entirely different aura. Shorter than average, yes, but with a massive barrel-chested frame that seems to harbor a raw, ancient strength. A strength that could effortlessly snap a thick oak branch. His facial features are wildly unrefined. A backward-sloping forehead framing enormous, deep-set eyes that gleam with intense, unwavering focus. And a large, prominent nose, a masterpiece of evolution, perfectly engineered to warm the freezing air of a lost world. He gently hands you the steaming cup. Those broad, rough fingers maneuver with an eerie silence. A fluid, terrifying precision that completely betrays his rugged exterior. Then, a deep "thank you" rumbles from his chest, resonating like a heavy echo bouncing off the stone walls of a forgotten, prehistoric cave. In that spine-chilling moment, you realize you are face to face with a living, breathing relic of human history, a true Neanderthal navigating our modern world. This is not some cheap sci-fi illusion, nor a fleeting dream. It is a chilling reality that almost came to be if the wheel of time had shifted just a fraction. In the standard timeline of our history, they simply vanished, fading away tragically on the freezing coastlines of Gibraltar around 40,000 years ago, obliterated by a perfect storm of cruel factors. A brutal ice age pushing temperatures below freezing, a collapsing population, and the bloody competition with our ancestors, Homo sapiens. But history is often just a chaotic sequence of blind luck. Imagine if that ancient climate change had progressed just a little slower, much like our world today, or if their dwindling tribes had merely a few thousand extra breeding individuals to survive. The dying embers of Neanderthal hope would not have been extinguished. Instead, those final sparks in the Iberian Peninsula would have roared back to life, pushing through that vicious genetic bottleneck with an unbreakable will to survive, marching proudly forward out of the Stone Age and into the Neolithic dawn, forging their way through the suffocating smog and fire of the Industrial Revolution, to finally stand tall and majestic, shoulder to shoulder with us in this hyper-connected digital era of the 21st century. But make no mistake, beneath those modern clothes, they are biological titans. At a mere 164 centimeters tall, you might be tempted to underestimate them. But that height is a brilliant evolutionary deception, hiding a biological machine built for absolute extremes. Their bones are noticeably thicker, denser, and significantly heavier than ours, riddled with massive muscle attachment points that reveal a body born to endure unimaginable physical stress. This means that despite their shorter stature, their explosive power is utterly terrifying. On a modern construction site, a Neanderthal worker effortlessly shoulders a massive steel beam without breaking a single sweat, defying the very limits of human biomechanics. A flawless mirror image of their ancient ancestors, carrying the massive carcass of a hunted beast across miles of freezing, waist-deep snow. In this alternate reality, Homo sapiens might still dominate the long-distance marathon, but Neanderthals are the undisputed kings of explosive strength and muscular resilience. They would outclass our top sapiens athletes with a horrifying, effortless ease, making them irreplaceable superhumans in any labor demanding raw, unyielding power. Yet, this breathtaking muscular superiority is merely the tip of the evolutionary iceberg. The true treasure, the feature that dictates their entire reality, lies hidden within their colossal eyes. Their massive eyes were originally designed to capture every single wandering photon during the endless, suffocating darkness of high-latitude Ice Age winters, evolving into a biological night vision system that borders on the supernatural. In our complex modern society, this turns them into peerless, irreplaceable specialists for the most dangerous jobs on the planet that demand flawless precision in the dark. Imagine a pitch-black disaster zone, power lines severed, smoke choking the air, while Homo sapiens rescuers stumble blindly, entirely dependent on heavy infrared optics. A Neanderthal first responder moves silently and swiftly through the wreckage, guided solely by their colossal, starlight-gathering eyes, saving lives in absolute blackness. Or plunge miles into the ocean, where a Neanderthal deep-sea welder works in the abyssal zone, seeing the intricate details of a cracked oil pipe with nothing but the faintest bioluminescence. An exact mirror image of their ancestors, stalking massive prey through the darkest, most terrifying blizzards of the Pleistocene. But these physical and visual marvels are just the outer shell. The treasure that redefines civilization itself is locked deep inside the architecture of their brain. Contrary to the arrogant, outdated prejudice that they were somehow less intelligent, a Neanderthal's brain was actually larger than ours, averaging well over 1,400 cubic centimeters. But the magnificent difference lies not in sheer size, but in its morphology and neural distribution. While Homo sapiens evolved a globular brain, heavily favoring the frontal lobe for abstract thought and grand planning, the Neanderthal skull extends backward like a rugby ball, revealing an explosive development of the occipital lobe, the command center for complex visual processing, three-dimensional spatial awareness, and micromotor control. This neurodivergence creates a fascinating, natural division of labor in our modern world. Picture a Neanderthal neurosurgeon, or a master watchmaker performing microscopic nerve suturing for dozens of hours, their stone-steady hands completely immune to fatigue or tremors. Homo sapiens represent generalist intelligence. We leap across vague, abstract concepts and take wild risks. In a modern tech conglomerate, a sapiens will passionately outline the craziest quantum physics theories, while a Neanderthal engineer silently crafts the exact nanometer-precise particle accelerator needed to prove it. A perfect cognitive symphony, the boundless flight of human imagination, firmly anchored by absolute physical precision. But if their minds process reality so radically differently, how exactly do they speak to each other? Biological evidence, from the FOXP2 gene to their hyoid bone, confirms they possessed complex spoken language. But driven by their hyperspatial, visually dominant brain, their language evolved entirely differently. Homo sapiens' everyday language is endlessly flooded with abstract, whimsical metaphors. We cry out about time flying like an arrow, or drowning in an abyss of despair. A Neanderthal would rarely use such vague, metaphysical nonsense. Their poetry and daily speech are intensely pragmatic, rooted deeply in raw, sensory experience. They wouldn't say, "I am falling into despair." They would describe that exact psychological state using visceral physics. "The earth beneath my feet is cracking and slippery." Their vocabulary is a chillingly accurate description of reality. Like the granular texture of falling snow, the metallic scent of wet stone after a forest rain, or the micro-tremors of the ground before a storm. Because words are not enough for them, their spoken language is fiercely bound to intense body movements. A single, deep gaze from those colossal eyes conveys more than 1,000 empty sapiens words. A heavy sigh, a subtle shift in posture, it is an ancient, unspoken symphony of micro-expressions. This profound difference in perceiving and describing the world ultimately forged two entirely opposite philosophies of building a civilization. Homo sapiens are, by nature, hurricanes of relentless expansion and constant change. We are heavily obsessed with massive scale, dizzying speed, and sheer dominance, leading directly to the birth of soulless concrete megacities and a toxic culture of mass production, rapid disposal. In stark contrast, prehistoric evidence shows Neanderthals were deeply rooted to specific local territories. If placed in our modern urban context, they would be the ultimate pioneers of the hyperlocal movement, flatly rejecting the exploitative grind of heartless, multinational corporations to fiercely maintain close-knit cooperative neighborhoods driven by direct consensus, not bloated bureaucracy. Their approach to technology? They would never chase the rushed, frivolous innovations of Sapiens. If a Neanderthal engineering team designed a mobile phone, they wouldn't release a flashy new model every single year for profit. Instead, they would meticulously dedicate decades, even centuries, to refining one singular prototype, honing it until it reached a state of functional immortality, perfectly unbreakable. In a world exhausted, spinning out of control, and bled dry by Sapiens' toxic consumerism, the Neanderthal philosophy of stability and meticulous care acts as a priceless, heavy anchor, forcing the runaway chariot of humanity to slow down and reflect before plunging off the cliff of self-destruction. But such a monumental gap between two entirely different species can never exist in absolute peace. The bloody history of Homo sapiens within our own species proves a terrifying truth. We have slaughtered and enslaved each other over mere variations in skin pigment, culture, or religion. So, when faced with an entirely different species, the resulting prejudice and fear would be catastrophic. The history textbooks of this alternate world would be stained with incredibly dark, brutal chapters. Sapiens, leveraging their numerical superiority and sheer cunning, violently pushing Neanderthals to the margins of society. An endless cycle echoing through time, from ancient Sapiens tribes driving them out of fertile hunting grounds, to modern riot police clashing with hominid equality protests on neon-lit city streets. Sapiens would mock them from glass towers, stereotyping them as slow, conservative, unimaginative, and dangerously backward. While Neanderthals, from their stoic, grounded perspective, would constantly brace themselves against us, viewing Sapiens as an inherently unstable threat. Loud, impulsive, insane, and deeply deceptive. Deeply rooted systemic exploitation would plague the labor markets, creating fierce socio-political battlegrounds. Endless centuries of bitter, exhausting debates over which form of intelligence is truly superior, building a seemingly insurmountable wall of biological tribalism and hatred. Yet, history is never just a one-sided story of destruction, because beyond the brutal instinct to conquer lies an even stronger, undeniable force: the curiosity of survival. Even in our lonely, actual reality, the DNA of modern populations still carries 1 to 2% Neanderthal genes, an undeniable biological proof of ancient, intimate crossroads. Now imagine if these two species had lived side by side, riding the same subways, attending the same universities, right up to a hyper-globalized 21st century where geographical borders are erased. Genetic intermingling would explode on an unimaginable scale. The world would no longer be divided into two distinct halves, but a vast, infinite biological spectrum, creating generations of humans carrying 10, 30, or even 50% Neanderthal DNA, rendering the very concept of a pureblood completely obsolete and utterly meaningless. Walk into any modern school and you would see an educational revolution. Abstract, linguistic-heavy lectures designed for sapiens' minds, running parallel to hypertactile, 3D spatial labs designed to maximize the Neanderthal occipital lobe. In medicine, autoimmune diseases or deadly sapiens viruses would be neutralized, hacked and cured by cross-referencing the robust, ancient immune system forged in the freezing Pleistocene. And by scanning two evolutionarily distinct brains simultaneously, we would finally unlock the deepest mysteries of consciousness itself. Ultimately, having Neanderthals walk alongside us into the 21st century would radically redefine humanity's worldview and our very place in the cosmos. When we stand together, looking up at the silent, starry night sky, it is the exact same primitive sky that the first sapiens and Neanderthal friends watched together, sharing the warmth of a crackling fire 40 millennia ago. We would profoundly understand one absolute, magnificent truth. The survival and triumph of a civilization does not belong to the most ruthless, nor is it the exclusive prize of the most cunning or deceitful. It belongs almost entirely to the capacity to embrace, accept, and celebrate our deepest differences. In our timeline, they vanished as an independent biological population, but their ancient DNA still silently travels within the cells of billions of people today. So, if a miracle allowed them to still walk among us in flesh and bone, the greatest lesson our Neanderthal brothers would teach this noisy world is not the raw power of muscle, but the profound art of patience and the appreciation of raw reality, reminding us that the road to a brilliant future is paved with tolerance, understanding, and unparalleled unity.